I think the UFC's pay-per-view commentary team has been trending down for at least a few years now, but I thought UFC 314 was especially bad. It was honestly so rough that I ended up watching the last round or two of the main event on mute, and that's something that I rarely do. I actually can't remember another time watching any sport where I've actually had to mute the broadcast because I thought it was so rough. And I went on Twitter, I saw a lot of similar complaints about the broadcast crew, and so I kind of just want to talk through some of the consistent issues that I've noticed pay-per-view after pay-per-view, and if I think there are any fixes that could be made here. So if you're someone who's, also had the same frustrations, this video might be for you. Pretty much just me ranting on some of the problems that I've noticed. Now, I'd say my number one criticism is that I think it's so clear that both Joe Rogan and Daniel Cormier do pretty much little to zero preparation for the actual pay-per-view cards. Joe Rogan catches some heat, and I think the most heat that he catches is when anytime anyone gets hit with anything remotely clean, he's like, oh, he's hurt, and he acts like every moment is some like fight-ending sequence. You also have pretty much like any submission attempt. It's like, oh, it's tight, he's in danger, and then like 2 seconds later, the guy will be out of it. Those are, I think, the common complaints for Joe Rogan. I'm not going to say I love that. Like, I don't think it's really adding anything great to the commentary team, but that really does not bother me a ton. My issue is that he sounds more and more like someone who just straight up does not keep up with the sport. And like, this is not me dissing Joe Rogan's like history and, how much he loves MMA, but I don't think you can watch him from like 10, 15 years ago compared to now and say that he's even like 50% of the fan and as invested in the sport as he was, 10, 15 years ago. I want to say in like round 2 or 3 of the Lopez-Volk fight, Rogan said something along the lines of like, I think Diego Lopez might be the more powerful guy in this matchup. And it's like, you have to just be completely out of the loop on anything MMA to like be coming to that realization. You could do 2 minutes of research for the Volk Lopez fight and figure out that Lopez has a huge power advantage in this matchup, and that's probably the biggest edge. Honestly, I feel like the entire commentary team, like round 1, round 2, I felt like they were being really harsh on Diego Lopez, with him kind of getting like outpointed for the vast majority of those first 2 rounds. And what confused me was like, if you've watched Volk fight and you've watched Diego Lopez fight, there's no way you should have been expecting Lopez to go in there and be outpointing Volkanovski. Like, I did a breakdown on this fight. I thought everyone was kind of on the same page where it's like, if this fight goes 5 rounds, Volk is going to win. He is the more technical guy. If his durability holds up, he is going to get his hand raised. It would have been shocking to me for Diego Lopez to outpoint Volk. Now, maybe he could have won a decision where he had a bunch of big moments and he, dropped him 3 times and won those rounds. But Diego Lopez was not going to go in there and outclass Volkanovski for a full 5 rounds and win the minutes, right? Lopez was going to win the moments. Volkanovski was going to win the minutes. So that started off was kind of odd. And then they were also like really in on Lopez to like push this pace. This is a guy who has never gone 5 rounds in the UFC. He's gone 3 rounds and seemed pretty tired against Dan Ige. So it seemed obvious to me that he wanted to manage his gas tank and didn't want to just throw everything out there and be like a sitting duck in the championship rounds. And I think we saw that, right? I feel like he saved his big bursts. He hurt Volk in the second. He hurt Volk in the fourth. Man, he just didn't find the finish. It happens. But from the commentary's team perspective, it was like shocking that he wasn't outclassing him. And then it was also shocking that he wasn't just going to blow all his energy in the first 2 rounds. And they were going so in on him. And then like he finds a huge shot and knocks Volk down towards the end of the second round. He also, in that Lopez-Volk fight, referred to Diego Lopez as the favorite heading into the fight. It's a mistake. It happens. You should probably know who the favorite is heading in, but whatever. And then John Anik corrects him and said, oh no, Volk was the favorite heading in. And then Rogan, it's like he couldn't believe he was wrong. He couldn't imagine he got it wrong. He goes, oh, you mean, yeah, now the live odds, Volk's the favorite. No, that's not what he meant. He got corrected, and he was still doubling down on the wrong thing that he had just said. Some of the other things I noticed from this card, Rogan seemed to think that Yair Rodriguez had somehow earned the title shot off a decision win against Pitbull, where he was coming off of back-to-back losses, one of those being to now the champion in Volk. And Brian Ortega, that was his first win in 2 years. Like, there's no rational case that Yair Rodriguez has earned a title shot. Honestly, in general, I just felt like he was extremely high on Yair, and I felt like we were talking about like different fighters or seeing two different fighters. He had like a good performance, but just like overall, Yair Rodriguez is not some sort of world beater. He was literally ragdolled by Ortega in his last fight. I also did not like the like, oh, this is levels here with Yair against Pitbull. It's something you hear a lot from like fans who only watch the UFC, where it's like, oh, these guys are showing levels. And it's like, was it showing levels when Chandler came in and knocked out Dan Hooker? Like, is it showing levels that Kayla Harrison is going to go in, come in from PFL and she's going to ragdoll Juliana Pena to win the belt? Like, if you're going to bring in and sign these men and women from the other promotion, I feel like we shouldn't be pitting this like, oh, it's levels of UFC versus Bellator, especially when this is not prime Pitbull. The man's 37 years old. He's been winning championship fights for the last like 10 plus years. I thought that was odd. The Bryce Mitchell fight, it seemed like Rogan was very high on pretty much everything Bryce Mitchell did, even though I felt like he was having very minimal success and was outclassed. Like, every time Bryce shot a takedown, it was either defended or Silva was threatening him with some sort of submission. Like, Bryce Mitchell is deep in a guillotine from Silva, and Rogan's like, oh, this is exactly where he wants to be. This is great for Bryce Mitchell. Like, no, it's not. Now, honestly, when we're talking about this commentary team, I can live with these issues from Rogan because I understand he's a busy guy. He has a huge platform. I understand he doesn't need to put in the same work that he did, right? He's paid his dues in this company. He's a very recognizable commentator, for the more casual audience. So I can put up with it from Rogan. I still have those issues, but I can understand it from his perspective, or from like the UFC's perspective, continuing to have him on. In my opinion, Daniel Cormier, DC, is unacceptably bad and has been for a while now. This man cannot remember any fighter's name who is not actively in the cage. There will be a fight that happened, 2-3 fights ago. Like, it happened an hour and a half ago. The name completely vanishes from this dude's mind. Literally every single card, you can bank on him pretty much creating a guessing game with the commentators relating to something happening in the fight. It'll be like, remember that guy a few weeks ago who did this? The dude in the lower weight class. And then the commentators have to like start shouting out names to try to guess who DC is possibly talking about. It's not a good look. And then I also think when you compare it to Joe Rogan, right? As a commentator, Joe Rogan has built up a lot of goodwill, right? Like, he was doing this for, I think, like little to no pay early on. He's been doing it forever. If anyone has earned the right to not put in the work, slack off a little bit, it is Joe Rogan. In my opinion, DC has not built up that goodwill as a commentator. Obviously, an amazing fighter, a top 10 fighter of all time. As a commentator, I just don't think he, has that built up at this point. He has been called out and pretty much admitted to not putting in enough work. Like, he was upset that Dominic Cruz called him out for not researching enough. But he wasn't upset because he was wrong. He was upset that Dominic Cruz would call him out publicly. Now, I could understand if you think, Dom's your close friend, you don't want him putting you on blast, but you should probably also, maybe take the advice and actually put in the work that all the other commentators do, or at least most of them. And I want to flash back to one specific example that I think is a great example of just DC not doing the job. UFC 303. This was Peyton Talbot as a minus 1,000 favorite against Giannis Gamori. So like, Peyton Talbot was a huge deal. People were super excited to see, this big time prospect fight. DC is on the weigh-in show, as they do for all the pay-per-views. This is, keep in mind, the day before the fights are happening, right? They're weighing in the morning. They fight the next day, in the afternoon/night. He is commentating this card. He says that it's crazy to have Peyton Talbot as a minus 1,000 favorite, and said, I quote, this is the quote, "I barely know who Peyton Talbot is." Keep in mind, Peyton Talbot, one of the most hyped fighters competing on this card, that Daniel Cormier is commentating. So he's saying it's crazy that this like unknown guy is a huge favorite. He's then told by Dan Hellie, who's also on the weigh-in show, that Peyton Talbot beat Cameron Saaiman in his very last fight. Then DC completely changes his tune and goes, oh man, he beat Cameron Saaiman. Cameron Saiman's really good. Like, this other dude might be in trouble. And then he thinks that he actually called the fight. He goes, oh, did I call that one? I think I might have called that one. He did not call the fight. You have a big time prospect fighting, And the dude commentating the fight barely knows who he is and doesn't even know who his last opponent is. And then, by the way, is like kind of trashing him, not trashing him, but like saying he shouldn't be this huge favorite when the man has no idea who he is. I just think that sums up DC's preparation like so perfectly. And I think he even tried to like correct it on the broadcast and said some BS about how for the young fighters, he looks at them, the day of the fight, which I think is just complete BS and completely untrue. And I think he was just, trying to protect himself there. So that's my first thing. You have DC and Rogan who just completely are not putting in the proper research necessary to actually put on, a good performance, in my opinion. And then my second biggest complaint, this is a little bit more minor, but this bugs me for some reason. You have commentators, specifically DC and a little bit of Bisping and Rogan, I guess, thrown in there, scoring rounds that are very, very competitive. And like for clear rounds, I get it, right? Like if someone lands a knockdown and the rest of the strikes are equal, then I get a commentator saying, that round should have gone to so-and-so. But I just don't think you can effectively judge close fights while you're commentating. There's a reason why the judges in there, and as flawed as they are not also like broadcasting what's happening, right? Like I think you should be taking notes. You should just be so locked in. You shouldn't be joking around, trying to think back to fights that happened, years ago, right? You should be solely focused on what is going on in there. And I just don't think that's what commentators do. I don't think it's crazy to say that like you can't effectively judge while you are actively commentating a fight. And I also just think time after time, Daniel Cormier has proven that he does not understand the scoring criteria. Every single event, you hear him reference control time or a takedown as a reason for someone winning a round, where in the scoring criteria, unless that takedown is like a slam, a powerful takedown, it has no effect. The control, unless the effective striking and grappling is equal, that control time means literally nothing, but you will consistently hear him say it over and over again. And he actually went out and responded to a fan after UFC 314. And I think the fan was complaining that Diego Lopez was commentated unfairly, like they didn't give him enough credit, which I kind of agree. By the way, I don't disagree with the decision. I think it was 3-2 Volk. I could see the case for 4-1 Volk, which I think DC thinks it was. But this was DC's response to that fan. He goes, "It was 4-1, brother, no matter how much you like your guy, and it was called that way. I know how to judge fights, so I know not to watch and get impressed by big moments." I would like to flash back, just like we did with the Peyton Talbot card, I would like to flash back to UFC 307 with Jose Aldo taking on Mario Bautista. If you guys remember, very controversial fight. It was a clear 1-1 fight heading into the third round. In round 3, Mario Bautista controlled Jose Aldo on the fence for nearly 3 minutes. It was a pretty boring third round because Bautista was just holding him there. Aldo in that round outlanded Mario Bautista 17-10 in terms of significant strikes. After that round 3, after the fight, Daniel Cormier believed that Mario Bautista had won the round. And this is what he said. I went back, I watched it, I got the quote. He said, "Third round, Mario Bautista completely controlled the round. He was able to push Aldo against the side of the octagon. When Aldo got away from him, Aldo was able to land. The problem is that he didn't get away from him very often." So he accurately broke down what happened. That is correct. Bautista controlled Aldo against the fence. When they were separated, Aldo outlanded him, right? He was the guy landing the more powerful, more consistent, damaging strikes. But he took away that Mario Bautista should have won that round based on the control time. Now, if they were equal 17-17 or very, very close in the significant strikes, and then you wanted to, go down the criteria list, I get it. That was not the case. Jose Aldo did more damage, was landing the more effective strikes, and according to the scoring criteria, Mario Bautista was not effectively grappling. Holding someone against the cage literally means nothing when one fighter outscores the other one. So DC clearly is just misunderstands the scoring criteria, but also thinks he understands it and thinks he should be scoring fights, which I just, could not disagree with more. One of the other things that bothers me about the commentator scoring cards, it's not just that they're saying it wrong, because who really cares? But a lot of times when they score rounds, especially close ones, and then they pretend like those rounds are definitive, those takes then get parroted by a portion of the fan base that's just hearing whatever is being said on TV, and then they're just like regurgitating it, on social media, online, whatever it may be. One big example that I can think of is the Magomed Ankalaev Jan Blachowicz, I think was the vacant title fight. If you guys remember, first 3 rounds, fairly competitive, all on the feet. In my opinion, the biggest moments were Jan Blachowicz just like beating the crap out of Magomed Ankalaev's legs. Round 4, round 5, Magomed went to the grappling, was able to rack up a lot of control time. Round 5, landed a lot of ground and pound, had a strong argument for that round to be a 10-8. The scorecards come in, ends up being a draw, and for whatever reason, Joe Rogan was so positive that Magomed won that fight and that Magomed was robbed that when he's interviewing Jan, like he's, heavily implying that Jan got this like BS decision or that the draw was a BS decision. And he had Jan like up there feeling like absolute garbage, like ready to just give the title to Magomed because he's getting like ambushed here with someone telling him that he should have lost the fight. And if you actually look at it, it's not a crazy scorecard to give Jan Blachowicz the first 3 rounds. Like you could maybe say they're competitive. Maybe you think one of those should have gone to Magomed. Like I'm not going to push back a ton, but it is a very reasonable scorecard to go first 3 rounds for Jan Blachowicz, round 4 for Magomed, round 5, 10-8. You have a 47-47 draw. But after hearing the commentary, you would have thought it was like the most egregious decision ever with how Joe Rogan was talking about it. So those are a couple of my big concerns here. Now let's just touch on how I think this could potentially be fixed. In my opinion, Daniel Cormier's got to go from the pay-per-views. Now, do I think this is going to happen? Probably not. I don't even know if the UFC is actually viewing this as like a concern right now because I feel like it's been trending down for a while and they haven't done anything. But if I were to fix it, I think you boot DC off the pay-per-views. It's clear, in my opinion, that the play-by-play guys, we're talking about John Anik, Brendan Fitzgerald, and John Gooden, all those guys put the work in. Now, you might like one guy over another. Like, I think John Anik is fantastic. I think he's the best in the business. I understand there are some people out there that don't like John Anik. Maybe you don't like Brendan Fitzgerald. Maybe you don't like John Gooden. I understand everyone has, like, their own personal taste. But I don't think you can ever say that those guys are underprepared, right? Like, John Anik, you might say some of his biggest mistakes so that he's over-prepared and he's like saying things that he potentially shouldn't, but it's never that like he hasn't done the work, right? Like I don't think you can say that about any of those guys. I have never watched a card where we're looking at the color commentary, which, is typically the former fighters. I have never watched a card with Laura Sanko, Paul Felder, or Dominic Cruz and felt that they did not put the time in. Now, I have my own personal preference. Like I prefer Sanko and Felder over Dominic Cruz. Not a huge fan of Bisping. I think he can be hit or miss sometimes. But of the commentators, former fighters that I'm confident have put the work in consistently, I do just prefer Sanko and Felder over Dominic Cruz. But I'm also just not going to rip on Cruz because I do think, he takes the job very seriously and puts a lot into it. And I think on these pay-per-view cards, you just have John Anik like constantly having to like correct and corral Rogan and DC as they say just straight up false stuff if they like start getting, off task. Like I think it's just a tough job for John Anik. And I think, he's not able to excel because he's just like doing damage control over the entire card. And so I just think you should have max one person that's not going to put the work in. So you're obviously not going to take Rogan off of pay-per-views. If you're taking him off of pay-per-views, you're just, pretty much firing him because he's not going to do anything else. Doesn't travel out of the country. So he's locked in on US pay-per-views. And so in my opinion, DC would have to go. And honestly, it's kind of crazy to me that like no one's really gone to DC and like put the pressure on him a little bit. Like you have Dom Cruz coming out and openly saying like Daniel Cormier does not put the work in. I don't think he's improved since then. I think maybe he's actually like regressed since then. And I just think it's weird that like there's just not some sort of pressure from the production team to like, hey buddy, like you gotta, hold up your end of the bargain here. So I think that's pretty much the end of my rant here. I thought it was rough. I think it's been rough for a while now. I'm not someone who's normally complaining about this type of thing, like I said at the top. So I think the fact that it is so frustrating to me means that it is, not going well. And like I've said, like everyone has, their own tastes on who they like. Like personally, not a huge fan of Bisping, not the biggest fan of Dom Cruz as commentators, but like if they're going out there and I can tell they're, adequately prepared, then I'm really not going to complain because I understand that everyone does have those different tastes. It's just the fact that if I can clearly tell that you are not putting in the work and like me doing some like random prediction video, once every week, if I feel like I know more about the fighters that are actually going out there and competing, I do think there is an issue because these guys are going out there getting paid and just clearly not putting the work in. So there is my rant. Let me know your thoughts. Do you agree, disagree? Do you have some different potential changes? Would love to hear it. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.